Hey my nerds! Before I begin, there will be spoilers in this video for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, so please come back and watch the video later if you haven't already seen the film. I don't want to spoil anything, and there is practically nothing I can say about the film that won't spoil it, hence the warning. In this video, we're analysing the growth of Marvel films when it comes to tackling mental health in their urban fantasy insanity, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To do this, we'll be focusing on my favourite character, Wanda, aka Scarlet Witch. Wanda is a character who demonstrates the growth of the MCU over the years, and she does so in more ways than one. Her power has grown, as has the scope of the challenges that she faces, and crucially for this video, the portrayal of her mental health has also changed, in a way that reflects quite well on the MCU. Barring a few hiccups like Spider-Man No Way Home, the MCU team have been on a general upward trend regarding their portrayal of mental health, which is amazing to see. Here is a team that's growing and continuously trying to do better, which leads me to wonder where they will go next, because their portrayal of mental health in fantasy is good, but they still have a way to go. So I'll end the video by touching on some of the ways character portrayal of mental health can still be improved in the MCU. But to begin, let's take a look backwards at Wanda's origins. Life has always been pretty rough for Wanda. A mortar explosion killed her parents while her family were eating dinner together. Although she and her twin brother survived, we later learn that they spent days staring at an unexploded missile, afraid to move lest it go off. The trauma this would inflict on a child is easy to imagine, and it makes it so believable that Wanda and her brother end up taking arms against Tony Stark, the maker of the missile. And this is where we meet Wanda in the MCU, a young woman fighting to defend her country from those who would harm it and leave other children without parents. It was arguably this trauma that contributed to the type of powers that Wanda developed. While her abilities are vast and powerful, she's also a telepath and can influence people's minds, which stems from her experiences since they left her that much more aware of the emotions of others. Highly empathetic people are often more alert to the emotional state of others because of the trauma they've been through. Their spider sense is tingling. So this is the state of Wanda early on in the MCU. In pain, but doing what she can to help others. We, the audience, are given to understand that bad things happen, and she is the way she is as a consequence of this. So far as the use of mental health in backstory goes, this is all pretty standard. Then Wanda's brother dies. Petro Maximoff, Wanda's twin and only surviving family that we know of, is killed at the end of Age of Ultron. And Wanda is given the appropriate amount of time to grieve and exact her revenge as per film law, i.e. one quick reaction shot of Wanda finding out her brother is dead, and then another of her getting all vengey and taking the life of the one who killed him. Then we're back to shots of Wanda becoming one of the Avengers, with the implication being that her grief and the process of healing that has to happen will be taken care of off-screen. It's an old trick, and one we've seen done lots over the years by creators who try to keep a lid on the darkest of their creations. It's a feat Marvel manages to do reasonably well for the next few films featuring Wanda in the MCU. Her next few appearances fail to make much of her grief. We see it used as motivation for her in Civil War, but that's about it. Flash forward to Infinity War, and then we get the next major trauma Wanda faces, the death of her lover, Vision. And in the worst way imaginable, as Wanda puts it in the Multiverse of Madness, she had to tear a hole in his head, and it meant nothing. I don't even know how someone is able to get through that kind of trauma, and apparently the MCU guys realised it wasn't something they had time to deal with in those films either, because they just dusted Wanda, deferring the matter for another film. Wanda then shows up again in Endgame along with everyone else who is brought back from the dusting, and again, the Marvel guys have too much else going on, so Wanda's trauma gets a fleeting moment in the spotlight when she attacks Thanos, but otherwise Wanda disappears back into the sea of other characters vying for screen time. Then, the MCU gang do one of the boldest things they can and build an entire TV series about Wanda and her grief. And my goodness, it is beautifully done. For those who haven't seen Wandavision, the show is an exploration of the lengths a person will go to if they could rewrite their reality in response to their experience of loss. It's the use of magic to recreate what was lost and the role that that can play in healing. For a Marvel show to have a clearly grieving woman as their protagonist is both novel and fascinating. It allowed the narrative to grow into something new. At the end, we're left with the hope that Wanda may finally be able to have the time to heal. But then along comes Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. The film starts out by making us think that Wanda has managed to recover somewhat from her losses, but we quickly discover that she has instead been consumed by a grief of a different kind, that of a mother for her children. In Wandavision, Wanda's powers resulted in twin boys being created that were a product of both her and Vision. Those twins are lost to her at the end of Wandavision, and in the interim between the films, she has just been taken over by the notion of getting them back. So much so that she becomes the villain of the Multiverse of Madness, and the entire plot is driven by what lengths a grieving mother might go to be reunited with her sons. Despite Wanda's long-held belief of being a good person, her instinctually protective nature is overridden in this film, and she goes to the dark side in a major way. The plot leans heavily into the idea that people in pain are hurting too much to consider those they're hurting, which is an unhelpful stigma about those in pain. We've seen it time and again. Dr. House is irritable because his leg hurts. Mr. Friedrichsen in Up is a grouchy man because he's grieving his wife. But grief and pain don't necessarily mean that people are bad. But while I would love to see more characters in the MCU who aren't corrupted by their pain, I can understand why Wanda wasn't going to be that character. For one, there would have been no plot for Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. For another, there was a magical device called the Darkhold, which seems to have been corrupting Wanda's mind in all sorts of ways, so we kind of have to give them a pass on this because magic. But even so, Marvel did a great job with this one. So what's changed? Has Marvel suddenly become good at portraying mental health in its films? Well, Spider-Man No Way Home is too recent in my mind for that, but I will say that when they give a character enough room to do justice to what the character's going through, then that's when Marvel does exceptionally well. We can see this if you look back at the screen time Wanda had in earlier films in comparison to how much she had in the Multiverse of Madness. Mental health issues need to be the focus of a main character to do justice to them. Otherwise, there just isn't the time to devote to the problem. The end result would be that the mental health of the character gets mostly glossed over. And this is what I'm applauding Marvel for actually going there, for making the choice to give characters like Wanda more screen time, and then letting the film that emerges become what it needs to be. Am I saying that Marvel is perfect and has nailed its representation of mental health? No, it still has room to grow, but I personally have a lot of faith that it will, and that's what excites me about the MCU, and it's why I find that the MCU is such a driving force of change in cinema. But, as I said, the Multiverse of Madness wasn't perfect, so what are the ways that the MCU can still improve when it comes to mental health representation? First off, diversity of mental health conditions is an easy one for them to grow with. There is a huge range of conditions out there, so there's plenty for them to be keeping themselves busy with when it comes to representation. Secondly, it would be great to actually see the process of healing attempted on screen, instead of being relegated to the space in between films. I realise this is hard because of the need for conflict to drive films, and because of the restrictions with the 3-act structure, but there are ways of doing this, so I look forward to Marvel giving that a go, hopefully. Thirdly, and because of the multiverse's ending, I'm not saying here that Wanda is definitely dead. She really could have found a way quite easily to have survived that if she wanted to, but Wanda's decision to kill herself is problematic. Sacrificial suicide is a trope we often see in fiction when a character's pain has led them to do bad things. Instead of giving the person the chance to heal, we accept that they should kill themselves because of the harm that they've done. Now, where people stand on the subject of forgiveness and redemption is something that varies from person to person and across societies. But how we punish someone for their crimes is a separate matter to whether an individual can heal. By having nobody even attempt to stop Wanda, what is the film saying about those who have experienced trauma and acted badly as a consequence? That they aren't capable of healing? that the only route for them is to commit suicide, this is neither true nor is it helpful. If Wanda comes back from the dead, then we will see her either doubling down on the darkness because she hasn't been able to heal, or we will see a redemption arc, which will inevitably involve her healing from everything she's been through. But in real life, we mere mortals, mostly, don't have the chance to come back from the dead. Suicide is usually final, and I don't like the implications that people should leap to suicide without first seeking help. And I know that she was destroying the Darkhold, but are you really telling me she wasn't powerful enough to destroy it without destroying herself? I'm interested to see where Marvel goes with this one, because as bad as Wanda behaved, as an audience, we can understand the brutal hand she was dealt. She lost her parents, her brother, her lover, and her children. And I don't like the idea of an MCU that gives up on people just because they are in pain. Whether or not she should be forgiven for what she did is a separate question, but I'd like to think that everybody has the chance to heal. Alright, my nerds. See you next time.